Welcome to MyShlaich Story Hour Chassidim series. Hi, Lachluchis. Today we begin to learn about and hear interesting stories about another Chosid of the Alter Rebbe. So far we heard about the Chosid Reb Pinchos. We spoke about the Chosid Reb Hillel Paritcher, who was a Chosid of the Mittler Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek, but got inspired to join Chassidus Chabad and really wanted to meet the Alter Rebbe very much. And today we're going to learn about a new Chosid of the Alter Rebbe. His name was Reb Pinchos Raizes. Now you may think to yourself, wait a minute, I don't recall ever hearing a story about the Chosid Reb Pinchos Raizes. Because most of you probably know him by the way he was referred to by Chassidim as Reb Pinchos Raizes. Later on, we're going to discuss how did Reb Pinchos, whose name was Reb Pinchos Raizes, get the name Reb Pinchos Raizes? Well, Reb Pinchos Raizes was a big Talmud Chacham, both in Nigla and Chassidishe. And something that made Reb Pinchos unique in the Lach is that he was a very, very wealthy Chassid. We didn't see that by the other two Chassidim we discussed, Reb Hillel Paritcher and Reb Shmuel Munkes. And in general, Chassidim were not known for being wealthy. But one of the things that made Reb Pinchos Raizes unique was that he was very wealthy and a big philanthropist, a very, very big Baal Tzedakah. He gave a lot of money to Tzedakah. Not only did he give money to Tzedakah, but he also gave of his time to help other people. You know, sometimes somebody says, how can I give tzedakah? I don't have so much money. Well, you can give from your time. You can help somebody. If you know something, you can teach them. You can give them some good advice. That's also a form of tzedakah. And Reb Pinchos Raizes was also very, very devoted to spreading the teachings of the Alter Rebbe. But what really made Reb Pinchos unique was that Reb Pinchos, to an extent more than any other Chosid of the Alter Rebbe, preserved hundreds, if not thousands, of the Alter Rebbe's teachings and sayings. He is the source, Kindalach, for many, many stories and anecdotes and accounts that happened and the goings-on of Chassidim in the times of the Alter Rebbe. It is no surprise that the Mittler Rebbe referred to Reb Pinchos Raizes as the General von Chassidim, the general of Chassidim. However, with all the above milas that Reb Pinchos had, he was a big Talmud Chacham in Nigla and Chassidishe, a very big Baal Tzedakah. The two main characters that one can say sets Reb Pinchos apart is his humility and his honesty, his tmimus, his emeskite, and his anava, his humility and his honesty. And where do we see this? Well, Kindalach, there's an interesting story. Many times the Alter Rebbe would ask Reb Pinchos Raizes to accompany him on different trips that the Alter Rebbe would go on. So let's say the Alter Rebbe would have to travel somewhere and have a meeting on behalf of the Yidden in Russia to take care of a gezerah, or had this meeting concerning the welfare of many of the Yidden. The Alter Rebbe would ask Reb Pinchos to come join him on this trip. Not every chassid was able to join. Only very, very exclusive and special chassidim that the Alter Rebbe felt and knew would be beneficial to this cause. One time, during such a trip, the Alter Rebbe noticed that Reb Pinchos was eating a piece of a pastry, a piece of cake. And what bracha, Kindalach, do you usually make on a piece of cake? The bracha beirei mina mezainis. So Reb Pinchos made a bracha mezainis and was eating the piece of cake. He didn't wash his hands for netilas yadayim and didn't say hamaitzi. And the Alter Rebbe turns to Reb Pinchos and says, Reb Pinchos, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch that I wrote in Birchas Hanenin, the Alter Rebbe brings down different opinions concerning which time, when you make the bracha mezainis and when you make the bracha hamaitzi on different types of dough. And now is not the time to get into the conversation about when you make mezainis and when you make hamaitzi, but this is the way the story goes. And the Alter Rebbe says, because there's a difference in opinion when a person should make mezainis and when a person should say hamaitzi, the Alter Rebbe says that a Baal Nefesh, it's best to make the bracha hamaitzi. Somebody should wash, have bread, and then they should eat a piece of cake. Says the Alter Rebbe, why are you not doing what I said? Why are you making a mezainus on the piece of cake? So Reb Pinchas answered, Rebbe, that's right. You wrote in the Shulchan Aruch that a Baal Nefesh literally means someone is a master of the soul, but it really means someone that's on a very high level. I guess that's a good way to explain it. A very, very big tzaddik. He's a Baal Nefesh, someone that's very, very in tune with his neshama. The Alter Rebbe, you said that a person that's a Baal Nefesh should act in this way and wash before eating cake. Have a maitzi and then eat the cake. But Reb Pinchas tells the Alter Rebbe, but Rebbe, I don't consider myself of belonging to such a category of a Baal Nefesh. I'm a Pashat Yid. I'm a simple Chassid. I'm not a Baal Nefesh. I'm not going to go start washing for a maitzi, not because I don't believe in it, not because I don't think that it's important, but I know, Rebbe, that you write that should be done by a Baal Nefesh, and I don't think that I'm a Baal Nefesh. So the Alter Rebbe looks at Reb Pinchas and says, Reb Pinchas, if I didn't consider you to be such a person, I would have never asked you to come with me on these trips and to be my personal attendant. See, Kindalach? The Alter Rebbe looked at Reb Pinchos Raizes as a Baal Nefesh. And Reb Pinchas didn't look at himself that way. Why not? Because Reb Pinchas was an Anav. He was a humble person. Now you can ask, wait a minute, why didn't Reb Pinchas wash anyways? Take could be that Reb Pinchas doesn't hold of himself as being a Baal Nefesh. But if he knows that the Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch that this is a proper thing to do for a Baal Nefesh, so maybe Reb Pinchos Raizes should have done it anyways. Kindalach. This is where we see the emeskite and the anova of Reb Pinchas. You see, on the one hand, Reb Pinchos Raizes said, I'm a humble person. I'm a pashut person. I don't think I'm a Baal Nefesh. I don't think I'm this big holy tzaddik. So I'm going to conduct myself as a simple person. On the other hand, Reb Pinchos Raizes is not going to say, Take, I'm not a Baal Nefesh, but I'm going to go do the things that a Baal Nefesh does. I'm going to pretend to be a Baal Nefesh. No. If I'm a Baal Nefesh, I'm going to act like a Baal Nefesh. And if I'm not a Baal Nefesh, I'm going to act the way a person that's a Pashut Chassid needs to act. I'm not going to try to be something that I'm not. I'm not going to put on a show. The person that you see, that's what you get. That's who really is. Pinchas was an Onav. He didn't try to make himself holier than he was. And on the other hand, he wasn't going to try to be someone or something that he thought that he wasn't. Now, the other two stories that we said so far of Reb Shmuel Munkes and Reb Hillel Paritcher, one thing that we found in common between those two Chassidim is that both of them came from not Chabad families. Well, the truth is that most Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe weren't Chassidim, definitely not Chabad families prior to becoming to the Alter Rebbe. They found the Alter Rebbe and Chassidus Chabad on their own and decided that this is the life they want to live, to be ibegegeben to Chassidus. And Reb Pinchos Raizes was no different. Reb Pinchos Raizes lived in the city of Shklov. And the city of Shklov was no simple city. As a matter of fact, Shklov was a very famous city amongst the Litvishe, amongst a lot of the Misnagdim, because this was a city where many big Talmidei Chachamim lived. Everybody knew far and wide that if you came from Shklov, either you are or you knew someone that was a very big Talmid Chacham. Now, in the city of Shklov, there was a shul, or a beis medrash, that was like the most choshev, most prestigious shul in all of Shklov. The name of the shul was called the Perushim Shul. And maybe at a later date we'll talk about what a Parush is. But that was the name of the shul. This is the place where the biggest Talmidei Chachamim learned. Now the Talmidei Chachamim of the Perushim Shul were divided into two categories. They were the late sitters, or the Spätsetzers, the people that would sit and learn every night until Chatzeis, until midnight. And then there were the early risers, the people that would wake up very early and come to the shul in the morning before davening to learn. So there were two shifts, so to say. You have the chaver that would sit, come later in the day and learn till late at night. And then you would have the people that would come early in the morning and learn Torah. But all in all, Shklov was a city filled with Limudat Torah. Now, one cold winter night in Chodesh Cheshvan, in the year Tov Kuf Lamed Aleph, 1770, On a Tuesday night, freezing cold night in Shklov, there was probably a lot of snow on the ground. You walk outside without 14 layers, you get frostbite. You can imagine a cold, cold Russian winter. And through the doors of the Beis Medrash, of the Prushim Shul, a gust of wind enters as the door opens up, and a young man, a stranger in town, enters the shul. Ah, what a relief from the freezing cold wind and snow from the outside to come inside to this well-lit and warm, toasty shul with a warm fire burning in the corner, and to warm yourself up by the fire with the halakha words of Torah. Nobody knew who this young man was and why he had come to town. However, there was an individual in the shul. His name was Reb Yerucham Doiv. This Yerucham Doiv, his job was a fisherman. So every day he would take his boat and his net and he would go out and he would catch fish. Now, it doesn't say this in the story, Kindalach, but I'm assuming if it was a cold, freezing, wintry night, I don't know how much fishing he can do when the river is frozen over. So he probably spent his days learning, and his nights as well. Breaking news. What? Yes, listen up. Taida Shluchim, Shluchis, young Shluchim, old Shluchim, parents, listen, a very, very important announcement. I know we're in the middle of a story, but this can't wait. Coming up very, very soon. By very soon, I mean Parshas Truma, Shabbos Parshas Tetzaveh. We got amazing Shabbaton. Shabbos Tzuzamen. You remember last year Shabbos Tzuzamen? You think last year was good? This is going to be even better. Here's the situation. Registration opens up tonight. We got so many calls for shluchim that want to host the Shabbos Tzuzamen. So if you want to have the schus, if you wanted the opportunity to host the Shabbos Tzuzamen by you, for all your fellow shluchim and shluchis around town, here's what you got to do. You got to go to your parents and you got to say, Ma, Ta, we got to sign up tonight to Shabbos Tzuzamen at MyShlaich.com/Tzuzamen. The sooner you sign up, the bigger chance you have to be able to have the schus to host this awesome Tzuzamen Kumenish and Fabrengen with all the shluchim around your area. So make sure tonight, Yud Gimel Tevis, to have your parents go to MyShlaich.com/Tzuzamen to have the opportunity to host a Shabbos Tzuzamen Shabbaton at your Chabad house. Let's continue with the story. Reb Yerucham Doiv, the fisherman, goes over to the guest that just walked into the shul that Tuesday night and says, Shalom Aleichem, come inside. Please sit down by the fire, make yourself warm your frozen bones. And so the visitor comes and sits down by the fire. And Reb Yerucham Doiv begins to have a conversation with him. And as the conversation progresses, Reb Yerucham Doiv realizes that this visitor to town is no simple person. He actually is a very big Talmud Chacham. It's no wonder that he came straight to the Perushim Shul, where all the Talmidei Chachamim of the city of Shklov are. This is where he's going to feel at home. And Reb Yerucham Doiv thinks to himself, I have a shaila in Masechtas Eirchim. Maybe I can ask this young Talmud Chacham if he can answer me my shaila that I have. This is a very, very difficult shaila. As a matter of fact, I've been asking all the Talmidei Chachamim in the city of Shklov if they can answer this question. And no matter how great the pilpul they give me is, the pilpul means a big shir in Torah, nobody was able to give me an answer that I found satisfactory that actually answered the question. But maybe this man will come from a different perspective and answer my question in Masechtas Eirchin. Now, Shluchim, if you think Masechtas Eirchin sounds familiar, you're right. It does. If you recall from our previous series in the story of Rabbi Parasher, he also had a question in Masechtas Eirchin for the Alter Rebbe. And we remember what the Alter Rebbe told Rabbi Parasher while Rabbi Hillel was hiding under the bed or under the couch, trying to arrange himself a meeting with the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe told him that when somebody comes and has a shayla Masechtas Eirchin, he first has to zich alein opshatz, and he first has to look into himself. He has to evaluate oneself. But either way, Reb Yerucham Doiv had a shayla Masechtas Eirchin. And so, Reb Yerucham goes over to the young man and says, Reb Yid, Shalom Aleichem, I hope you're okay if I don't mind that I ask you a question. I have this and this question in Masechtas Eirchin. Maybe perhaps you could explain to me the question I have. It goes like this. The Gemara says, And at the mere mention of the topic, he just mentioned the sugya. He didn't even give him all the details. He just started telling him, Benegea, this and this topic. Right away, the young man, the guest, started repeating Baal Peh, word for word, the Gemara and Rashi, and started explaining the Gemara and the Rashi, Pasha Taichin Gemara Rashi, and just translating every line of Gemara and every line of the Rashi that goes with it. And listening to the visitor's translation of Rashi, Rabbi Yerucham Dov suddenly realized that his big shaila that he had, that nobody was able to answer, was actually not a question at all. It was just a misunderstanding in the way he touched Rashi. Can you imagine that? The man thinks he has this big, huge shaila, and every Talmid Chacham in the city of Shklov that he went to was not able to answer him. And this young man, who clearly was a Baki B'Shas, who repeats Gemara Rashi Baal Peh, all he needed to do was touch Rashi, and Rabbi Yerucham Dov realizes that he had no question at all. Wow, that's unbelievable. Rabbi Yerucham Dov says, I didn't realize that not only was I learning the Rashi wrong, but everybody in the shul apparently was misinterpreting the Rashi. They were teaching the Rashi in the wrong way. This is fascinating. How could we have been so wrong? So he right away runs over to the other Talmidei Chachamim and people that are sitting and learning that night in the shul, and he begins to tell them that this young guest sitting by the fireplace just touched Gemara Rashi, and all of a sudden the big question that everybody had, he answered right away. It's as if it didn't exist. If that's the case, all of the Talmidei Chachamim gathered around the young visitor to ask them their own questions. And they're asking this question and this sugya and this mesechta and that Rashi and this Tosfos and that Marsha. And they're sitting around, listening attentively to the wonderful answers and explanations on all the different Gemara Shailas and all different topics and sugyas that this young man is answering them clearly and brilliantly. You know who else participated in this conversation? There was a big Talmid Chacham, a big genius. His name was Reb Yosef Kolboy. Now, Kolboy wasn't his last name, but Kolboy was the name that the people in the town gave him, because Kolboy is two words. Kol, all, boy, in it. They called him Rabbi Yosef Kolboy because they said, in this Rabbi Yosef, he has all of it. He was a baki in Kol Ateidah Kula. That's how big of a Talmid Chacham he was. Rabbi Yosef Kolboy is participating in this conversation, and he gets up and he begins to shower the visitor with such praise. This is amazing. This Talmid Chacham, his way of teaching, his way of learning was so much greater and so much on a deeper level than the people in the great city of Shklov, in the Perushim Shul, were accustomed to learning. Now, Reb Pinchos, like we said, also lived in the city of Shklov. And Reb Pinchos Raizes was part of the shift who was called the early risers, right? The people that came to shul early in the morning. When Reb Pinchos comes to shul early Wednesday morning, he's shocked to see that the shul is still full from the people who were the late sitters, the people that did the night shift of Limud HaTorah, right? We said some people came and learned all the way till midnight, and some people came in the morning. Reb Pinchos was from the shift that came in the morning, and instead of seeing his friends or the shul empty and the people that come in the morning starting to come to shul, the whole crew of Talmidei Chachamim that learn at night were still sitting there in the morning. And they were sitting around the table, listening intently to this visitor. And as the visitor was just beginning to explain a new topic, Reb Pinchos decided, you know what? I'm not going to learn my regular shiurim. I'm going to sit and listen to what this visitor has to say. You can imagine. He was so enthralled by the guest's 3-hour explanation on some topic and discussion in Torah that right after Shachris, Reb Pinchos right away ran home to tell his father. His father's name was Chanech Henech. Reb Chanech Henech was the Av Bezdin, the chief Rav of the city of Shklov. Reb Pinchos ran home and began to chazer over with his father the Dvar Torah and the shir that this guest had given over in the shul. Now, Reb Chanech Henech was a big Talmid Chacham himself, and he was exceptionally pleased with the pirushim and with the explanation and the pshat that this young visitor gave in shul. And he decided, you know what? I want to have a discussion with him as well. However, nobody knew who this young Talmid Chacham was. All they knew was that he was a Talmid, he was a student, and not a Rav. This happened on Wednesday. The following day, on Thursday morning, the Talmidei Chachamim of the town were able to convince the visitor to give them a shir. Apparently there was a shir every single day in the shul. And the Talmidei Chachamim said, this guest is such a big goyin, maybe he can give us a shir. And you know what? A shir he gave. And it wasn't stam a shir. It was a shir for 5 hours. Could you imagine sitting in a shir for 5 hours? Well, if this was your melamed, if this was your teacher, and he was giving a 5-hour shir in Gemara, Mishnayis, with Perushim of Rishonim and Achreinim on the topic that they were learning, although it was a very long shir, it was given over so clear and such a geschmack that the 5 hours passed by so fast. Later that afternoon, the young visitor left town, and it was only some time later that the people in the city of Shklov realized who this visitor was. Kindalach, can you guess who it was? It was none other than the Eloi, the genius of Liozna. That's how the Alter Rebbe was known in those days. He was known as the genius of Liozna. And you know how old the Alter Rebbe was? The Alter Rebbe at the time of this story was only 26 years old. At that time, he was known as a Talmid of the Mizritcher Magid. Years later, Kindalach, after Reb Pinchas himself became a Chassid, he described this incident, this conversation that happened in the middle of the night in the shul. And he said that this story caused the Misnagdim later to be very against the Chassidus and the Alter Rebbe. You see, because the Misnagdim felt that they were tricked. And because they were tricked that this guy that was such a big Talmid Chacham and gave them a shir was actually a Chassid, this caused them a lot of frustration. How could they have given this Chassid of the Mizritcher Magid, who later became the Alter Rebbe, how could they have treated him with such respect and such praise? Which in turn gave respectability to the entire Chassidic movement. When they, the Misnagdim, were so against it, how could they have given such kavod to the Alter Rebbe? And they suffered another tremendous setback when it became known that the great Talmid Chacham, Rabbi Yosef Kolboy, who also gave praise to the Alter Rebbe, like we said earlier, he also became a Chassid. And Reb Pinchos Raizes remained a Misnagid and stayed in the city of Shklov for another 9 years, until eventually he too became a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. How did that come about? Well, let's find out in the next episode.